The doors of the Magnolia Crest Ballroom had barely closed behind the last guest when Camille walked into room 714 of the Hotel Verdant on the corner of 5th and Magnolia. She was still in her wedding gown, a layered tulle that had taken her mother Beatrice 12 seamstress hours and 28 years of prayer to sew by hand. The hem was uneven. The pearls along the bodice had been borrowed from a thrift store in Birmingham. The veil had been stitched from the lace of her grandmother's tablecloth. She was shaking, not from cold, not from champagne, but from the slow, heavy exhaustion of being told all morning that the woman who raised her could not eat at the wedding table where her own daughter would sit as a bride. She sat on the edge of the king bed. She looked across the suite. A folded envelope waited on the writing desk. A second envelope waited beside the first. Inside the first was a brass key on a leather fob bearing the Westbrook insignia. Inside the second was a letter that would, before sunrise, reverse everything the Westbrook family had spent 31 years trying to bury. She did not know yet that the man who had signed the prenuptial agreement as a janitor had been walking into that same ballroom for 15 years, as the chief executive officer of the company whose name hung above the entryway. She did not know that her mother, who had cleaned offices at night and folded tablecloths by morning, had once carried the founder's only daughter out of a fire in the copy room on the 4th floor and been told to never speak of it. She did not know that the envelope had been written by a founder who had been waiting for the right hour, and that the right hour had arrived the moment her granddaughter had been told her mother could eat only in the kitchen. But to understand how Camille ended up in room 714 in a borrowed veil, you have to travel back 28 years to a December evening in Birmingham, when Beatrice first signed her name on her daughter's birth certificate. Beatrice was 19 when she had Camille. She had been 19 when she had finished high school, and 19 when her own mother, a woman named Lauretta who could read the weather in a sprain, had taught her how to fold a fitted sheet, how to stretch a biscuit dough so the center stays tender, how to lay a table so a poor man feels rich and a rich man feels welcome. Beatrice had been 19 when her first husband walked out and left her with a diaper bag on a porch and a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat in Titchewsville. She was 23 when she took the night shift at Westbrook Industrial Holdings, the company whose glass tower would one day own the skyline of every neighborhood where Beatrice had been told she could set her napkin. She cleaned, she mopped, she emptied the trash barrels that smelled of cucumber sandwiches and decisions made by men who did not know her name. She came home at 4 a.m. and taught Camille her letters on the back of receipts. She came home at noon and cooked collard greens in a slow iron pot her mother had given her before Lauretta died. She came home at 6 and sat on the back step of her duplex and looked out across Cleveland Avenue and watched the long quiet of the evening settle into the kind of dark that holds a woman who is not yet tired of being tired. Camille grew up in a yellow duplex on Cleveland Avenue. The kitchen smelled of cornbread and chamomile. The living room smelled of fabric softener and library paste. The front door was always unlocked, because Beatrice trusted the world enough to leave a door open and wise enough to teach her daughter to read a stranger. There was a recipe book in a drawer in the kitchen, an old spiral notebook with the binding held together by 2 pieces of electrical tape, written in pencil by Lauretta before Lauretta died. Every page a small lesson in how to feed a person in the way that makes them feel as if someone had been waiting at the gate. There was a faded photograph of Camille's grandmother Lauretta on the wall above the stove, a woman in a wide hat standing in front of a church no one in the family had visited in years. If this story reached your heart, kindly tap the subscribe button before you leave tonight. There was a hand-me-down blanket on the back of the couch, brown and frayed, and folded with the military precision only a woman who has lost everything can teach her hands. There was a kitchen timer shaped like a chicken that Camille was not allowed to touch until she was 7, and a child's drawing of 2 figures holding hands tacked to the refrigerator with a magnet from a savings bank that had since gone out of business. There was a small brass bowl of water on the table by the door, with a single hibiscus floating in it, replaced each Sunday by Beatrice with the quiet discipline of a woman who believed that a bowl of clean water is a kind of prayer. When Camille was 11, she won a spelling bee at Titchewsville. Mentory by spelling the word responsibility with the slow breath her mother had taught her to take before every word that mattered. When she was 13, she cooked her first full Sunday dinner alone, fried chicken and collard greens and biscuits and sweet tea, and her mother stood in the doorway and wept without making a sound. When she was 16, she wrote the essay that won her a 4-year scholarship to a state university in Atlanta, and her mother framed the acceptance letter In a frame she had sanded herself from a piece of pine that had come loose from a pallet at work. The frame was crooked on the wall. The frame was the most important thing the duplex had ever owned. When she was 19, she met Andre Westbrook at a student mentor mixer in Buckhead. He was 28. He wore a navy tie and a small gold pin on his lapel that she did not yet know was the insignia of a man whose family owned half the real estate she had been walking past since she was 3. He was patient. He was patient in the way only men trained by wealth are patient, the patience of a man who knows the door will open because he owns the building. He took her to small restaurants where the servers knew his name. He opened car doors for her. He told her she was the most dignified woman he had ever met, and she believed him because she had spent her whole life being told the same thing by a mother who had no reason to lie. He flew her to Savannah for a weekend. He bought her a laptop she did not need, and a coat she did not want, and a watch with a cracked face she could not bring herself to return. Drop a single comment telling me which moment made the tears come. He proposed on the lawn of the State University with a ring the size of a city, and she said yes with the slow breath her mother had taught her. And her mother, who had walked the lawn behind a row of oaks, answered with the same slow breath. The wedding was scheduled for the third Saturday in October at the Magnolia Crest Ballroom, a venue whose chandeliers had been imported from Italy in 1987, and whose menu committee had earlier in the year approved a seating plan in which Beatrice was assigned a chair at a folding table in the catering kitchen, behind the swinging door that opened into the ballroom. The justification on the seating chart was printed in a font that did not apologize. Family of the bride, service staff. Beatrice would be allowed to watch her daughter walk down the aisle from behind a stack of stacked chafing dishes. Beatrice would be allowed to eat only after the cake had been cut, and the guests had been served, and the bridal party had been photographed. Beatrice would be allowed to leave by the service corridor on the east side of the building before the toasts began. The dress code for that corridor was black. The dress code for the ballroom was ivory. Camille saw the seating chart the morning of the rehearsal dinner. She did not, at first, understand what she was looking at. She understood by the time she reached the word service on the third line, and the understanding came into her body before it came into her voice. She looked up at her fiancé. She looked at her future mother-in-law, a woman named Patricia who organized charity galas for the Westbrook Foundation and had her hair pressed twice a week. She looked at the wedding coordinator, a young man named Tyler who was paid by the hour and was already calculating the cost of changing the chart. She did not raise her voice. She did not raise her voice because her mother had never raised her voice. Her mother had taught her that the loudest thing a woman can do in a hostile room is to stay completely still. Share this story with one friend who needs to hear it this week. She walked out of the rehearsal dinner. She walked to her mother's duplex on Cleveland Avenue. She rang the doorbell. Beatrice opened the door in her work smock and saw her daughter's face and understood everything before Camille spoke a word. They stood in the kitchen where the recipe book lived and where the drawing on the refrigerator was beginning to yellow and where the kitchen timer still had not been wound in 4 days. Camille sat at the table. Her mother poured her a glass of water. Her mother did not tell her what to do. Her mother waited. The waiting was the kind of waiting only a mother who has buried her own mother and raised her own daughter alone knows how to do. The wedding took place. Camille wore the dress her mother had sewn. Beatrice sat in the kitchen behind the chafing dishes and ate a plated lunch that had been set aside for service staff and drank a glass of sweet tea that had been poured into a plastic cup. Patricia did not bring her a plate. Patricia did not speak her name. The bridal party walked past the kitchen doorway once during the toast and Camille did not look in. The toast was lovely. The bride was lovely. The groom was quiet, which he had been for the entire engagement in the way only a man who has been a quiet groom is quiet. The quiet of a man who has known what he was going to do and was waiting for the hour his family had agreed on. At 9:14 that evening, the grandfather of the groom walked into the catering kitchen and laid a folded napkin in front of Beatrice and told her she was welcome to sit at any empty table in the ballroom she liked. She chose the smallest. She sat alone. She cut her own piece of the cake with the small silver server the staff had left on her plate. She ate it slowly. If you just arrived, consider subscribing so the next story can find you. The reception ended, the guests left. The staff cleared the ballroom. Camille and Andre walked into the bridal suite, room 714, with the doorman who had been paid to keep the hallway quiet and the photographer who had been paid to take one final photograph of the couple on the threshold of the building where Camille's mother had cleaned offices for 19 years. The photographer retreated. The doorman retreated. Andre excused himself to take a phone call from his father. Camille sat on the edge of the king bed. She looked at the envelope. She opened the envelope. Inside the second envelope was a letter typed on the stationery of the founder of the company, a man named Harold Westbrook, who had died 4 years earlier and whose voice had lived on in the office of his attorney. The letter explained, in language a sixth grader could read, that on the night of the fire in the copy room on the 4th floor, Beatrice had carried the founder's daughter out of the building on her back. The daughter had been 3. The daughter had grown up to marry a man named Andre. The daughter was Patricia. And Harold, who had never forgotten the name of the woman who had carried his child out of a burning building, had left a letter in the vault with instructions that the letter be delivered to Beatrice or to her eldest daughter on the day of Beatrice's youngest daughter's wedding. The letter instructed the trustee to transfer to Beatrice a 15% ownership stake in the company, a seat on the board, and a distribution schedule that would, before sunrise, deposit more money in Beatrice's bank account than the catering budget for every Westbrook wedding had cost in the past decade. Tell me in the comments what lesson this story reminded you of. Camille read the letter twice. She set it on the desk. She walked across the suite to the window and looked down at the Magnolia Crest ballroom and the parking lot below where the valets were stacking chairs. She did not weep. She had not yet reached the hour when weeping was the right gesture. She thought about her mother folding tablecloths in a kitchen that had been built so her mother could not be seen. She thought about the uneven hem of her wedding gown. She thought about the recipe book on Cleveland Avenue. She thought about the slow breath her mother had been teaching her since she was 3 years old. The slow breath was the language a woman uses when the language of a courtroom will not be enough. The slow breath was the language a woman uses when the room is hostile and the chair is a verdict. The slow breath was the language a woman uses when she has been told, in a font that does not apologize, that the kitchen is the room she is allowed to sit in. The slow breath was, she understood now, the language the founder had written into the vault. Andre came back into the suite. He had finished the call. He saw the letter on the desk and his face did the very small adjustment that faces do in hotels when a plan has just been revealed by the wrong door. He looked at Camille. He did not yet know that Camille had read the letter and that the letter was about her mother and not about him. He picked up the phone. He called his father. He told his father, with the careful calm of a man who has learned to use the careful calm in all the wrong places, that the letter had been delivered to the wrong room. His father, who had been the trustee of the vault since Harold's death, told Andre in a voice so flat it sounded like furniture that the letter had been delivered to the correct room. The trustee had followed the instructions of the founder. The founder had been clear. Letter was to be delivered to the woman who had carried his daughter out of the building, or if that woman had died, to her eldest daughter on the day of the bride's wedding. Andre had been told of this clause. Andre had not been told the clause was real. Andre, his father now informed him, had been told what every grandson of a patriarch is told when the patriarch has died, and the trust fund is the only inheritance. The inheritance comes with instructions, and the instructions come with consequences. If this story blessed you, drop a heart in the comments for the woman who refused to stay broken. The next morning, a black car arrived at the Hotel Verdant and led Beatrice from Cleveland Avenue through the service corridor and into the executive dining room on the top floor of the Westbrook Tower, where a seat at the head of the table had been laid for her with linen the color of cream and a small vase of lupin. Patricia sat 2 seats down. The attorney sat at the foot of the table. The trustee sat at the other foot of the table. At 9 in the morning, the attorney opened the vault and read aloud the founder's final letter to his family. The letter named Beatrice. The letter described the fire. The letter described the chair on the board. The letter described a transfer of stock that would, at the opening bell of the market that day, deposit into Beatrice's name a sum larger than the catering budget for every Westbrook family wedding of the past decade. The letter closed with a sentence the founder had underlined 3 times in his own hand. A debt paid in this world is a debt that does not pass into the next. Camille had spent the night in room 714. She had not slept. She had read the letter a 3rd time. She had read the recipe book in her memory. She had thought about the kitchen timer on Cleveland Avenue. She had thought about the drawing on the refrigerator. She had thought about the slow breath. She had called her mother at 6 in the morning. She had told her mother that the letter had arrived. She had told her mother that the truth could not be hidden, and that the truth would not be hidden by her, and that her mother should choose the hour. Beatrice had told her daughter that the hour was the same hour the founder had set, and that the hour was the morning, and that the morning was now. Tap that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a redemption story. The kitchen team at the Magnolia Crest Ballroom had been told the previous evening that they would be feeding 1 extra guest at the executive dining room the following morning. The extra guest had been named. They had been told to set the table the way they would set it for the founder. They had been told to lay the linen flat. They had been told to fold the napkin, in the way the founder had taught the kitchen staff to fold napkins in 1987. The kitchen team had not been told why. They had been told only that the founder's instructions had been written into the trust fund. The trustee had followed them. The trustee had, in his own words, never known the founder to write a clause that did not need to be followed. Beatrice sat at the table. She wore the dress she had worn to her daughter's wedding the day before, a charcoal dress she had sewn herself a year earlier, since the dress she had planned to wear had been sent back to the seamstress on Patricia's instruction 3 weeks before the wedding. She wore the dress calmly. She set her napkin on her lap the way she had been taught to set a napkin in every dining room she had ever cleaned. Patricia sat 2 seats down. Patricia did not speak. Patricia had been told, by her husband, by her son, by her own father in a conversation that had taken place in this same room the year before he died, that the letter existed. Patricia had been told that the letter would arrive. Patricia had been told that the letter was the founder's final word on the question of who Beatrice was in the Westbrook family. Patricia had made a decision. The decision had been to seat Beatrice in the catering kitchen. The decision had been a test. The decision had been the mistake a man who has been told he has been given power and not yet wisdom would make, the mistake of believing that the chair a person sits in is the chair a person deserves. The founder had underlined the same sentence 3 times in his letter. The founder had been clear. Kindly leave a like and pass this story along to someone whose night feels heavy. The attorney finished reading. The trustee signed the document that transferred 15% of the company's voting stock to Beatrice's name. The transfer registered at the opening bell of the market. By noon, Beatrice's net worth had risen above the value of Patricia's townhouse. By 3 in the afternoon, the value had risen above the value of Andre's grandfather's estate, and the trustee, who had spent 41 years managing the Westbrook Trust, informed Patricia and Andre that the founder's instructions had also included a clause that, upon Beatrice's acceptance of the board seat, Beatrice would assume the controlling interest in the family vote. The Westbrook family had absorbed the rise and fall of 3 recessions on the strength of that vote. The vote would now be cast, if and when Beatrice chose to cast it, by a woman who had cleaned offices at night and folded tablecloths in the catering kitchen where her own daughter had been told to seat her. Camille walked into the executive dining room at 11. She had changed into a dress she had packed in her overnight bag, a simple green dress her mother had sewn for her graduation from State University. She had not brought a new dress. She had not needed a new dress. The slow breath had prepared her for the room the way the slow breath had prepared her for every room she had entered as a child of Beatrice. With patience, with dignity, with the calm that comes from a household where someone has been praying for you every morning since you were born. She walked to her mother's chair. She did not embrace her mother in the room. She set her hand on the back of the chair. She looked at Patricia. Patricia looked back. Patricia's face was the face of a woman who had spent the morning in the same chair her mother had set for her, which had been until the morning the chair the Westbrook family had inherited as a kind of furniture. Camille did not speak. Camille did not need to speak. The chair her mother sat in was the chair the founder had set for her, and the founder had written the chair into the foundation of the company that bore his name, and the company was now at the opening bell of that morning more Beatrice's than anyone else's in the room. Camille returned her hand to her side. She walked to the chair across from her mother. She sat. She unfolded her napkin the way her mother had taught her. The slow breath. Send this to your mother, your sister, your best friend, anyone whose life this story may steady tonight. The rest of the morning unfolded the way a morning unfolds when a family has been told, in language a 6th grader could read, what the founder had been thinking for 28 years. Andre entered the room at noon. He had spent the morning in the hotel with his father, calculating what the transfer of the voting stock meant for his inheritance, for his career, for the small pin he wore on his lapel at dinners. He entered the dining room with the careful walk of a man who knows the floor under his shoes is no longer the floor he was told it was. He walked to his mother. He did not greet Beatrice. He did not greet Camille. He asked his mother, in a voice that was meant to be quiet and was instead heard by every person at the table, whether Patricia had known what the letter had contained. Patricia answered her son that she had known. Andre's face did the additional adjustment. He sat, he did not eat. The kitchen team brought out the breakfast the founder had set on the menu for this room 41 years earlier, soft scrambled eggs and candied bacon and stone-ground grits and a single biscuit for each plate. Beatrice ate, Camille ate, the trustee ate. Patricia did not eat. Andre did not eat. By 2 in the afternoon, the trustee had completed the transfer of the chairperson seat. The founder's final clause had named Beatrice as the next chair of the Westbrook Foundation, the family charity that funded after-school programs in 7 cities, and a scholarship fund that had been quietly underwriting the tuition of one Camille Hayes, who, the trustee noted, had been the recipient of a Westbrook scholarship since her first semester at State University. The amount of the scholarship was small. The amount of the scholarship had been chosen by the founder, in his own hand in 1996, when the founder had first read the file on the woman who had saved his daughter's life and had understood, in the way only a man who had built an empire on the back of small kindnesses could understand, that the smallest kindness is the kindness on which the largest inheritance is built. Camille did not announce her own scholarship to the room. She had not known. She did not know until the trustee named her name, and the trustee named her name in the careful way a man names the daughter of a woman whose kindness has been kept in a vault for 28 years. The trustee did not pause for applause. The trustee did not pause for gasps. The trustee paused only for the time it took to read another sentence, a sentence the founder had written in the second-to-last paragraph of the letter, a sentence the trustee had underlined in his own hand because the founder had underlined it 3 times in his. A debt repaid in this world does not disappear in the next. The trustee read the sentence. He looked up, he looked at Beatrice, he looked at Camille, he closed the letter. Hit that subscribe button so the next inspirational story arrives at your door without delay. The afternoon brought meetings. The foundation board met in the conference room down the hall. The new chair, Beatrice, sat at the head of the table. She wore the same charcoal dress. She had not been given a new dress. The board members, who had flown in from 3 cities, looked at the woman at the head of the table with the look of men who had been told, in language a 6th grader could read, that the woman at the head of the table was the woman the founder had wanted at the head of the table since he had first seen her carry his daughter out of a burning building in 1996. They listened the way valets listen when they see a woman they have been told to seat in the kitchen walk into the ballroom in front of Th. The board voted to rename the after-school program the Beatrice Hayes Center for Working Mothers. The board voted to expand the scholarship by 20 seats. The board voted to underwrite a small kitchen on Cleveland Avenue, in the yellow duplex with the recipe book and the hand-me-down blanket, where Camille would, in the autumn after her first year of marriage, open a baking school for daughters of women who clean offices at night. The afternoon ended. The sun came down over the Westbrook Tower. Camille returned to room 714 to pack her overnight bag. André had not come to the room. André had gone home to his mother's townhouse. André had called Camille 3 times. Camille had not picked up. Camille had picked up on the 4th call. André had told her in a voice that was the voice of a man who has just been told the floor he was standing on was borrowed that he wanted to talk. Camille had told André that she would listen. André had asked her where. Camille had told him she would listen on Cleveland Avenue. André had not been to Cleveland Avenue. André had not yet known how to get to Cleveland Avenue. The next morning Camille took the slow train into Titchewsville. André met her at the laundromat on Cleveland Avenue. André stood in the doorway of the yellow duplex and saw the recipe book on the table. André saw the hand-me-down blanket on the couch. André saw the drawing on the refrigerator, 2 figures holding hands, drawn in crayon by a girl who had grown up to be the daughter of the founder of the company that bore the name on the pin he had worn at his wedding. André did not enter the duplex. André stood in the doorway and waited. Camille came out of the kitchen. Camille had been cooking. She had been cooking because her mother had taught her that the way a woman quiets a room is by feeding it. She set a plate on the small table beside the door. She set out 2 biscuits, a slice of cobbler, a glass of sweet tea. André sat. He ate. He did not speak for a long time. Camille broke the silence in her own slow breath. She told André that she had loved him. She told André that she had still loved him at the rehearsal dinner. She told André that a woman who loves a man does not stop loving him because the man she loves has made a mistake. She told André that the slow breath was the loudest thing she could do in a hostile room. She told André that the man she had married had been the man who had stood beside her at the altar with a small pin on his lapel, and a quiet smile, and the slow patience of a man who has been told, he has been given power, and not yet wisdom. She told André that the man who had stood beside her at the altar had not been the man her mother had been told to fold a napkin for in the kitchen. She told André that the man who had stood in the doorway of the yellow duplex had eaten 2 biscuits on a Tuesday morning, and had not until that moment known that biscuits are a language. If this story reached your heart, kindly tap the subscribe button before you leave tonight. André did not speak. André ate the second biscuit. He set the plate down. He told Camille that he had not known what the seat at the kitchen table had meant. He told Camille that he had been raised in a household where the seat at the kitchen table was the seat a family was given as a kind of furniture. He told Camille that he had not been taught that a chair is a language. He told Camille that the man who had been raised in that household was the man who had stood beside her at the altar. He told Camille that the man who had stood in the doorway of the yellow duplex was a man who had begun to learn, in the last 48 hours, that the slow breath is the loudest thing anyone can do in any room. He told Camille that he wanted to learn. Camille poured André another glass of sweet tea. The glass was a plastic glass. The plastic glass was the kind of glass Beatrice had been given on the day of her daughter's wedding in the catering kitchen. The plastic glass had not changed. Camille set the plastic glass in front of the man who had not known how to get to Cleveland Avenue, and the plastic glass was a small forgiveness. And the small forgiveness was the kind of forgiveness the founder had underlined 3 times in his letter. And the founder had known, in the way only a man who had built an empire on the back of small kindnesses could know, that the smallest kindness is the kindness on which the largest inheritance is built. Drop a single comment telling me which moment made the tears come. Beatrice did not go to the duplex that morning. Beatrice was at the foundation office. Beatrice was reviewing the budget for the Beatrice Hayes Center for Working Mothers. Beatrice was signing the first of 20 scholarship checks. Beatrice had been given a new chair for the office. The new chair was a leather chair that Patricia had ordered from a showroom in Buckhead. Beatrice did not sit in the new chair. Beatrice had brought her own chair. From home. The chair from home was the chair from the kitchen in the yellow duplex. The chair from the kitchen had been the chair where Loretta sat when she wrote the recipe book. The chair from the kitchen had been the chair where Beatrice sat when she taught Camille her letters on the back of receipts. The chair from the kitchen had been the chair where the slow breath had been practiced for 3 generations. The chair from the kitchen was a small chair. The chair from the kitchen was, in the way only a chair can be, a lifetime of language. The Westbrook family met at 6 that evening at the townhouse on Peachtree. Patricia had invited 12 people. Patricia had not invited Beatrice. Patricia had not invited Camille. Patricia had invited her husband. Patricia had invited her son. Patricia had invited the trustee. Patricia had invited 3 lawyers and 2 accountants, and 1 publicist whose firm had, in the preceding 48 hours, lost 2 of the Westbrook accounts on the strength of the news that the new chair of the foundation had been the night janitor for 19 years. The meeting opened at 6. The trustee told Patricia that the family meeting was the wrong meeting. The trustee told Patricia that the founder had left a final clause he had not read aloud that morning. The final clause was a clause Patricia had not been told existed. The final clause said, in language a 6th grader could read, that the Westbrook house on Peachtree, the Westbrook house in Sea Island, the Westbrook house in Aspen, the Westbrook private plane, and the Westbrook family car fleet would, at the death of the founder, transfer to the woman he had named in the first clause, and that the woman he had named in the first clause was Beatrice, and that the transfer would happen whether or not the Westbrook family approved. Because the founder had built the house, and the plane, and the fleet on the foundation he had laid for a woman who had carried his daughter out of a burning building. Share this story with one friend who needs to hear it this week. The trustee read the clause. Patricia sat down. André sat down. The lawyers sat down. The accountants sat down. The publicist did not sit down. The publicist left the room and did not return. Beatrice learned of the transfer at 7 that evening in a phone call from the trustee. The trustee told her that the founder had thought of her every day of his life since the night of the fire. The trustee told her that the founder had believed, in the way only a man who had built an empire on the back of small kindnesses could believe, that empires rise or fall on the small kindness the empire is willing to overlook. The trustee told her that the founder had underlined the same sentence 3 times, and the sentence had been waiting in the vault for 28 years for the right hour, and the right hour had been the morning she had eaten the cake alone at the smallest table in the ballroom. The trustee told her the houses were hers. The trustee told her the plane was hers. The trustee told her the fleet was hers. The trustee told her that the founder had not built any of it for comfort. The founder had built it for the day he would no longer be alive to make sure the small kindness was returned to the woman who had given it. Beatrice answered, in the slow breath her mother Loretta had taught her, that she would accept the houses and the plane and the fleet on one condition. The condition was not a financial demand. The condition was a request, in language a 6th grader could read, that the Westbrook family visit Camille's bakeries in Titchesville, in Birmingham, in Atlanta, in Memphis, and in Houston, one Saturday a month for 1 year. Sit at her tables, eat her biscuits, drink her sweet tea, and listen without interruption to the story of the night she carried the founder's daughter out of a burning building. If you just arrived, consider subscribing so the next story can find you. The trustee wrote down the condition. The trustee read the condition back. The trustee told Beatrice that the founder would have underlined that condition 3 times if he had been alive to read it. The Saturdays began in November. The Saturdays became monthly. The Saturdays became a tradition. The cakes the family ate were always Camille's cakes. The biscuits were always Beatrice's biscuits. The recipe book was always on the small table by the door, and the recipe book was always open to the same page. The page on which Loretta had written in pencil on the night her daughter was born. A sentence that Beatrice had underlined 3 times in her own hand, and Camille had underlined 3 times in her own hand. The sentence was the sentence the founder had been writing in the vault for 28 years, without knowing he was writing the same sentence. The sentence read in pencil, in a hand that had folded fitted sheets and stretched biscuit dough, and laid tables, so a poor man feels rich, and a rich man feels welcome. This, a table set with patience, is a table that holds a kingdom. Tell me in the comments what lesson this story reminded you of. Camille and Andre were not divorced at the end of that year. Camille and Andre were married at the end of that year, again in the kitchen of the yellow duplex on a Saturday morning in November. The wedding was small. The bride's mother stood at the door. The bride's mother wore the charcoal dress she had sewn herself a year earlier. The bride wore a green dress her mother had sewn that morning. The bridegroom wore the coat he had worn on the day he had walked into room 714 and seen the letter on the desk and understood, in the way only a man who has been given power and is now learning wisdom can understand, that a coat is a sentence and a chair is a language and a kitchen table is a kingdom. If this story blessed you, drop a heart in the comments for the woman who refused to stay broken. The matron of honor was the founder's daughter. The matron of honor had been 3 the night of the fire. The matron of honor had been Patricia. The matron of honor had stood at the kitchen door of the duplex and wept without making a sound. The matron of honor had held the bride's hand. The matron of honor had told her, in the slow breath her father had taught her, that the kitchen table had been the truest altar she had ever stood at, and that the biscuits had been the truest bread, and that the Westbrook house on Peachtree was going to be sold, and the proceeds would go to the Beatrice Hayes Center for Working Mothers, and the Westbrook private plane was going to be sold, and the proceeds would go to the baking school on Cleveland Avenue. And the Westbrook family car fleet was going to be sold, and the proceeds would go to the scholarship fund that had once been the size of a single tuition check and would, by the end of that November, be the size of a city. Tap that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a redemption story. The cameras were not in the kitchen. The cameras were not invited. The cameras had been told by Beatrice, by Camille, by the trustee, by the matron of honor that the cameras did not have a chair at the kitchen table, and the chair was the only chair that mattered. The story I want to leave you with tonight is not about revenge. The story I want to leave you with is about a chair. A chair is a small thing. A chair is a thing a person sits in. A chair is a thing a family is given as a kind of furniture. A chair is also, in the way only a mother and a daughter and a grandmother can teach a household, the chair a man is taught to wait beside, the chair a stranger is taught to sit in, the chair a granddaughter is taught to set a plate on. A chair is a language. A chair is a kingdom. A chair is the sentence a man writes when he has underlined it 3 times in his own hand. There is a kitchen on Cleveland Avenue. The kitchen is small. The kitchen smells of chamomile and fabric softener and cornbread that has been baking since sunrise. The kitchen has a recipe book on the table and a hand-me-down blanket on the couch and a drawing on the refrigerator and a small brass bowl of water with a single hibiscus floating in it. The kitchen has a chair. The chair is the chair Loretta sat in when she wrote the recipe. The chair is the chair Beatrice sat in when she taught Camille her letters on the back of receipts. The chair is the chair Camille sat in when she set a plate in front of a man who had not known how to get to Cleveland Avenue. The chair is the chair the founder of an empire set in his own vault and waited 28 years to give. The chair is the chair a slow-breathed woman has carried through 3 generations without ever raising her voice once. The question I will leave you with tonight is the question the founder underlined 3 times in his letter, and the question is the one the recipe book has been answering in pencil since long before the founder ever set his claws in a vault. The question is small, and it is the heart of the story. When you see a chair, do you see a chair? Or do you see the woman who has been waiting to sit in it? And when you see a woman, do you seat her in the kitchen, or do you seat her at the head of the table where she has always belonged?